15 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour, and Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program. Spending the remainder of today's program, however, talking about local news and Vermont news with reporter Mike Faher of many, many media outlets, Brattleboro Reformer, The Commons, and VTDigger. You can follow him along at Twitter at Mike Faher. I was making a special point to mention your Twitter handle because I know how much you love Twitter.
I love it.
He does. He's a big, big fan of Twitter. Make sure you hit him up, Mike Faher. And I'm sure a lot of people right now are wanting to see what you're saying, what you're writing about, what you link to on Twitter because of this story that happened last week, a huge story that happened last Tuesday. And no, I'm not talking about the elections here, although certainly some of these things will have impact locally with a new governor. But this news that Entergy had sold Vermont Yankee to North Star Group Services, a New York-based company, and it came out on Tuesday morning. Nice little job there of trying to sneak it in. Did you have any inkling that this was going to happen? Were there signs that we could look back and say, yeah, there was this sale on the horizon?
I think there were. There was a story that I did the week prior where the state commissioner of public service had said, well, maybe we can get decommissioning done in the 2020s. And
that's Recchia?
Right, yeah.
Chris Recchia.
And so I called him and asked him about that and said, gee, why do you think that? And so he sort of listed some, reasons, and I wrote a story, and lo and behold, 5-6 days later, the news of the sale broke and the earlier decommissioning.
Would it be a situation where Entergy would want to tip off the state that this is something that is in the works? Do you think, he clearly had some inside knowledge that this was happening. Do they feel like, as far as making sure it all goes through smoothly, that there was some back channel communication there?
Well, certainly. The governor's statement about the sale came out about 10 minutes after Entergy's press release.
Good point.
Hit the wires last Tuesday morning. So, Entergy and the state had a 2013 shutdown settlement agreement that laid out all sorts of provisions about funding and cleanup and things like that. If for no other reason, I think they would have needed to be talking about the changes that are going to occur, with that if this sale goes through. So yeah, there was definitely some communication with the state.
I got to think that the NRC rulings too that were favorable to Vermont Yankee, the fact that they were saying, and we can manage this decommissioning process, we don't need the state oversight. I got to think that some of those bureaucratic hurdles being cleared might have been the final closing deal here for the announcement.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, the timing. I'm not sure why it was last week. They acknowledged, Entergy acknowledged that the sale had been in the works for years.
Okay.
So this was a very...
Specifically with North Star?
Well, a sale.
Okay.
And I got the impression, talking with the president of Entergy Wholesale Commodities, that they had looked at other potential buyers. He said they had done their homework extensively. So. Okay.
Well, and North Star just won. They're the buyer, but there's a number of different entities, and you point this out in your Wednesday story about this, that there's a number of different firms here who are part of the process of taking on this job. But what do we know about North Star Group Services, this New York-based company? We know that they are a cleanup company, as they're put here, but is this a project that they have a precedent of doing? Have they worked specifically with nuclear material before?
I don't think that North Star does a lot of nuclear-related work, but they made a point of saying we've got these partners, not even subcontractors, but partners in this project. And some of those, a couple of those firms, including, if I'm saying this right, Areva, which was based in Paris, is a really big nuclear contractor. And so, the idea is they're going to have a lot of expertise on site, whether it's North Star, Areva, or someone from the other two companies. Yeah, well, and this story broke, like I said, Tuesday morning. I was reading it. And actually was in here with Chris Mays of the Reformer, and the first thing I saw the headline, I was like, why would somebody buy this? What do they get out of it? And then I read what I think is one of the greatest sentences you've ever written, just for the understatement of North Star presumably plans to turn a profit on the job. How does one turn a profit on a job on a plant that's no longer generating revenue? Yeah, the way it's been explained, it is interesting. Why would you want to shut down a nuclear plant? But the way it's been explained to me is, right now the trust fund is paying for all the operations down there, the security, the other employees, the lights, everything. So if you're a company that comes in and says, I can do this job for X amount of money, and that number is, you're going to build a certain profit margin in.
Right.
Well, we've got this much in the trust fund. I can do the job for this much. There's my profit.
Finding efficiencies and then taking essentially the rake, right, from what's left over in that decommissioning fund.
Sure.
Now, this is still subject to NRC oversight, still subject to state oversight, this sale. There are some concerns there, I would think, as far as safety. When you talk about efficiency, sometimes safety gets compromised there.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be. I know that, given that the State Public Service Board took over a year to review and approve a concrete pad at Yankee to store the spent fuel, I'd imagine that this review of this sale could take even a little longer. And groups like the New England Coalition have already said, we're going to be involved to make sure that the plans, seem safe, that they're satisfactory. So,
Well, and by and large, you had a follow-up story on Thursday, optimism tempered by many questions, where you spoke to, I think, pretty much everybody who would have a vested interest in this, going right down to people within the town of Vernon, to Chris Campany, Windham Regional Commission, Kate O'Connor here in the town of Brattleboro, who chairs the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. By and large, they were all being, as you said, optimistic about this sale and about the process going forward. A lot of pluses for Vernon if this goes all according to plan.
And for the state, I mean, the idea of having this decommissioning done by the end of 2030 as opposed to the end of 2075, it's hard to argue with that. Again, as you say, if it's done safely. Of course, as Kate said, the devil is in the details. And one of the things that the state and the NRC is going to look at is, does this new company coming in have the financial wherewithal to do this as quickly and as safely as they say? Yeah.
You quote Kate in here talking about this being good news, and if the work can be done safely, we'll be moving in the right direction. I did yesterday, I think, I got a notice that the next meeting for the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel that she chairs has been postponed or canceled. Is there anything to read into there, or is that just kind of coincidental as far as scheduling, or is this still going to be an entity moving forward in the process?
Oh, it will. It definitely will. I think what happened there is obviously the big questions right now. Everybody wants to know about the sale. Everybody wants to hear from North Star. And as I understand it, North Star wasn't going to come this Thursday for the NDCAP meeting. So why not put it off until December 1st, which is when they've rescheduled it for, so we can hear directly from them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll certainly look forward to your reporting on that. Mike Faher, you can find his writing in a whole bunch of places, VTDigger.org, commonsnews.org, as well as the Reformer website, reformer.com. Back with more conversation with Mike. You're welcome to join us too, 802-254-5286, or you can just tweet him at Mike Faher. 36 degrees outside at 22 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings, your host, Chris Lenois, continuing my conversation now with Mike Faher, staff writer for VTDigger, The Commons, Brattleboro Reformer. Find his stories everywhere, and always appreciate him coming in here and elaborating on some of the things you'll find with his byline in print. 802-254-5286 if you have any questions for Mike on the topics that we're covering this morning, spending that first segment talking about the sale of Vermont Yankee and kind of a companion story, Mike, in today's Brattleboro Reformer when you talk about this announcement about SchoolHack solutions, getting funding from the Windham County Economic Development Program, which is coming from the settlement after the Vermont Yankee shutdown. And a nice chance to revisit every once in a while how this closure and the deal between the state of Vermont and Entergy is benefiting Windham County.
Yeah, so in 2013, the shutdown settlement agreement between the state and Entergy said, we'll give you $10 million, and that's $2 million every a year for 5 years, excuse me. And the state then doles that money out how they see fit with some local input, grants and loans.
Yeah.
And they've distributed, I think, close to $5 million of the $6 million that Entergy has paid.
Yeah. And we'll just call it WikiDip here
Sure.
rather than Windham County Economic Development Program, so we have some time to talk a little bit about SchoolHack Solutions. This is a company that people know in this area because of these personal development plans, personalized learning systems, LIFT. This is being used in the Windham County school system, I believe.
I think so. They said they're in 25 Vermont schools, and they have a local connection as well because Green River, Brattleboro software company, helped them develop this personalized learning program. They've only been around, SchoolHack that is, has only been around for about 2 years, and they're based in Bristol. But this money from the WCEDP fund is going to allow them to establish a presence in Brattleboro.
Not a moving from Bristol to Brattleboro, but a satellite office, if you will.
Yeah, I think that, as I understand it, and appropriately so, given that this money from the WCEDP fund is supposed to be used in Windham County, that investment will happen here. And they're establishing their own IT department as well as, some sales and customer service positions. They didn't say how many, but they did say that all of those will be established in Brattleboro.
Yeah, well, and this is a question I always go back to when I talk to people interested in economic development issues here in Windham County is what kind of businesses will Windham County tolerate? Yeah. And I've said education is one of those that all along. But this blending of education and technology, this strikes me as a really, really good fit here when you think also about, well, Marlboro College has the Ed Tech program. There are actually people here learning the skills that probably this company's SchoolHack could use.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that the CEO of the company cited is the talent pool. And when he said that, he was also talking about the idea of being able to draw from the tri-state area.
Sure.
Which sometimes is seen as a disadvantage. Brattleboro's location down here in the corner, but he sees it as an advantage.
Yeah. $350,000
right.
is what they're getting from the WCEDP fund, and this is a loan, so something that they would be paying back. To my knowledge, that's, other than GS Precision, that's the biggest allocation that they've given to any company. Do you have a recollection that's different?
I'd have to check that. I mean,
that's
GS
big.
Was definitely really big. I mean, over $1 million. And given the size of the project, that made sense. It was big. I think it's important to point out, as you do, that it is a loan. The grants have generally gone to the nonprofits and the loans to the businesses. The idea being that even once this money goes out the door, it'll become more of a revolving loan fund.
Yeah, well, and I brought that up not necessarily to question the amount coming from the WCEDP fund, but the size of the presence they're planning for Brattleboro strikes to me as something significant, not just like a sales office and one IT support guy.
Yeah, and I was a little disappointed that I couldn't pin them down as to how many jobs they plan to create. But the CEO said that not only do they want to expand to schools outside Vermont, they want to expand internationally. So that would require some real infrastructure. Yeah,
well, that's a great story, a great beginning. When you think about the story we talked about in the opening segment too, about this acceleration of the decommissioning process down in Vernon and the economic opportunities there, it is nice to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, in some ways more distant than others, but it is something that's coming together. Some closure as well in stories you've been writing this week, Mike, about the Stiles Brook wind project with the vote last Tuesday in the towns of Grafton and Windham. I mean, really, as far as the no on those votes, I'm sure you didn't react to anything other than that answer with a shrug. Like you knew this was going to happen, even though you and I had some conversations and you were kind of saying, well, there might be this unspoken support for this out there. Really no surprise, the margin of victory for the rejection of the Iberdrola projects.
I had some folks tell me even up there, though, that they were surprised by that margin. Not necessarily that it was rejected. I think it started to become clear there was a lot of opposition, but there was no question in either of those towns. And, if you looped in the non-resident surveys that came in, I mean, those were even more overwhelmingly against. Not that they hold any legal weight or carry any legal weight, but yeah, I think I was surprised by the margin and how easily it was defeated. Now,
Iberdrola issued a statement the next day, and you had that in your follow-up coverage saying that they were going to respect this decision. They were going to move forward unless the communities changed their mind. And so they're done with it. But as you point out in a story, even after that, this only applies to that one project. The idea of wind coming to the Windham Grafton communities is not a settled issue.
No, in fact, the ballot language that everyone voted on last week in Windham and Grafton specifically mentioned as proposed by Iberdrola Renewables. So anyone else who develops wind turbines could come in and basically take over the project and run with it. And they, another developer does not have to make the same kind of promise that Iberdrola made, which was, we'll respect the local vote.
And in fact, why would they after what happened there, right? I mean, why would they?
In hindsight, and I don't know that I've ever had a chance to really speak candidly with Iberdrola about this, but the question is, why did they?
Right.
They were under no legal obligation to do that. All they had to do was file with the state and see what the state said.
Yeah, and Meadows End, the company that owns the land, certainly still desirous of doing something like this for their profit margin.
They are.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Now, the one thing I could see it having an impact on is the Public Service Board. The fact that they are, under the new renewable energy siting, at least wanting to give more deference to towns and their planning. When they see a rejection like this, if another company comes along and wants to develop similarly Stiles Brook project, and I think you point out in one of your stories that basically another developer could take all the work that Iberdrola has already done as far as an assessment and just basically put that plan in place, right? Is that so? But this could influence the PSB, the Public Service, or I should say the full name of it, in their decision on granting any kind of certificate of public good.
Well, it's interesting. There's some caveats with. There was legislation passed at the end of last session that theoretically gives towns more say, not veto power, but more say in the energy siting process. But as I understand it, there's some things that have to happen. A town plan has to be reviewed, certified by the state. You can't just enact any old restriction and say, well, now we've got the power to sort of make a developer listen to us. So it is still a state-driven decision process. But, the incoming governor it's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, he has certainly been somebody who has not been fan of industrial wind and has said he doesn't think that it's I don't remember. I think he's in favor of the veto for local communities. Am I wrong about that?
I think he's generally against any large, what they say, commercial scale turbines. There's a school of thought that those just aren't a good way to work toward Vermont's renewable energy goals.
Yeah. How much do you think that overall sentiment about wind played in him getting elected? Certainly, I didn't have a chance to look at the vote totals for Sue Minter versus Phil Scott in those communities of Windham and Grafton. I don't know if you got a chance to peek at that or not.
Well, now I wish I had.
Right?
You brought it up. But you know what? It makes me flash back to the night of the primary election. And I was sitting in Peter Galbraith's living room and when he was losing the primary to Sue Minter. And there were a lot of anti-wind folks who had rallied around Peter because he had said no wind turbines. And that night, and it could have just been, election night anger, but a lot of the folks in that room were saying, there's no way that we'll support Sue Minter. We're going to support Phil Scott because we know he's against turbines like Peter was. Interesting.
Now, I think that this whole renewable energy siting controversy we're already seeing it spill over into solar, even though some people will talk about them being different things. We've seen some communities push back on solar siting arrays as well. Do you think that in that Windham Grafton community, is there similar intolerance for any sort of renewable energy development in Stiles Brook, or is it really something that is wind specific?
I think it's wind specific. I mean, certainly, I guess we'd see if somebody suddenly came up with a 2 megawatt solar array like the one we see at Exit 3 in Brattleboro. But, when I'm thinking of all the issues that were talked about with Stiles Brook, things like aesthetics, things like the sound, none of those would be factors with the solar development.
Yeah, good point. And those were a lot of the things that were brought up, whether rightfully or wrongly or research-based. Those were some of the things that certainly had people in those communities concerned. Big day for you today with radio stuff. I want to let people know you're going to do later on today, so people, if they can't get enough of your voice on my show.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to be on VPR talking about the Vermont Yankee as well. So, yeah.
Noon to 1, right? Is that Vermont edition?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, cool. And any stories coming up this week you want to tease with your byline?
Yeah, there was an interesting forum yesterday morning on foster care placements being up dramatically in Windham County and the impact that has on the schools and things like that. So that'll be something I'm writing up as the week goes on.
Good. Yeah. We did a call to action forum about the system and had Sue O'Brien, the district DCF director here, and certainly the different ways that the opiate epidemic has impacted them. deserves a lot of attention. Glad to know you're writing that. Always appreciate you coming in and talking with us about it. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you.
And that is Mike Faher, VTDigger, The Commons, Reformer.com, and on Twitter at Mike Faher. Back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings after these messages.